What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of the DNVR Rams Podcast presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. It's a rare Wednesday show. I appreciate you guys being flexible with me. I will be off on PTO the next couple of days as my younger brother is getting married. It's a whirlwind. It's genuinely crazy. I'm also getting married in the fall. But the fact that my younger brother is getting hitched feels like way more of a trip, just the fact that my little bro, man, it's pretty crazy. He also is a CSU Ram. I got a whole family of Rams, so I'm really looking forward to that. I've got a lot to get into today. Kind of a random off-season podcast. We're going to be all over the place. I am going to get to those bold predictions that you guys sent in on social. My apologies for rambling way too much about the CSU Air Force stuff yesterday and taking too long on my own predictions. I just figured it would be better to save it for today. Topics are limited, so just, gotta roll with the punches as we get into the dead of the off season here. I'm a little bit shell-shocked, honestly, coming off of that Avalanche sweep. In some senses, I'm good that I'm gonna have more like CSU time again and be able to really lock in here as we go into the Pac-12 era. But it was a tough way for a really fun season to come to an end. And just for me personally, I really wanted to cover a Stanley Cup team. It would have been a dream come true. Still waiting to cover a lot of bucket list moments. I finally did get to cover a championship team with the Mountain West run from the CSU Hoops back in 24. I don't know why I said that so weird. Finally got to cover a championship run when CSU men's basketball won the Mountain West tournament in 2024. Obviously, the first conference championship for football or men's basketball in 2 decades. But it really felt like this was going to be the year for the Avs, and I feel like this is kind of one of those losses that makes it tough for me to stand by principles that I really do stand behind as both a content creator and a sports fan, and that's enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, because sports are often heartbreak, as was this experience. But this is up there with, like the Broncos in 2012 and that Raheem Moore debacle. I wasn't old enough really for the 96 season, but 2005 was one that was always tough for me. The Nuggets in 2009, I know people talk about 24, but especially 29 and even 2013 with the Gallo injury. The Avs have done it a bunch of times in my life. 0-2 last year, this year. Feels like I kind of brought the Ram life over to the Avs beat, though. So I know you guys will be stoked to have me more locked in on the CSU side of things again. But if I'm a little bit down on today's show, just know I am a little bit in my feels. I am rocking the Broncos gear today, as Kevin has pointed out in the Toyota chat. You can't really see, but I got the number 11. I got the BVP jersey on. It felt fitting given the topic we're going to get into later. I'm going to talk a little bit about my process of creating the top 20 list for the Mountain West era, kind of what I thought about and what I struggled in terms of weighing, statistical accomplishments versus raw talent versus just general legacy, which is a little bit more ambiguous and open-ended. But I figured I'd rock the BVP jersey and maybe that'd make me feel a little bit better. I don't know if this first segment is. Basically inspired by what happened with the Avs, I was like, what are the most devastating CSU losses of my media career? I've talked a lot about some of the games from my childhood that still, to this day irk me. I'll never get over that 0-2 UNLV game. You had a chance to run the slate. Just blew it at home. That sucks for one of the, better teams in school history. Obviously, the 2004 showdown and Marcus Houston getting tackled just short of the goal line with a chance to walk off the Buffs in their own building. Brutal. But this is probably the most bummed I've felt since the 24 NCAA tournament, where Derek Queen got away with the travel and CSU's Cinderella story came to a tragic end. They fall 72-71 to Maryland with a chance to advance to the Sweet 16. To this day, that still probably would have been the coolest thing I've ever gotten to cover, and I am bitter about it. The 23 showdown was obviously brutal. Standing on the sideline at the end of the fourth quarter with Bradlee Van Pelt, my childhood hero, and watching CSU completely piss down their own leg and blow a golden opportunity to pull off the upset of the century, in front of millions of people. That one will always be a tough pill to swallow as well, especially just the way it all went down, and Mo getting the ridiculous targeting calls and getting ejected, and Norvell not electing to go for the win, and just everything that kind of compounded there. That was brutal. The 22 NCAA tournament was tough, not quite on par with these other ones. Obviously, 2017 Boise State on the football side of things is historic in terms of how CSU blew that one. You're up 28-3 in the first half. They led by 2 touchdowns with under 3 minutes to go. That's what really gets me. It's one thing to blow the big lead early to a really explosive Boise State offense that had, multiple NFL guys on it. You led by 14 with 3 minutes left after Body scored, and you still ended up losing that game in overtime. It's unfathomable. An underrated one, though, kind of my first year writing columns on CSU football was 2016. I had gone over to the Collegian after, interning for CSU football for a couple years under McElwain, and then for a few months under Bobo. The Rams lose 49-46 in the Springs. It was a really fun game. It was a shootout, kind of like that 08 BYU matchup in Fort Collins. This was part of the stretch where I feel like Nick Stevens really solidified his position in this program. Early on in his career, I felt like Bobo just kept throwing him into these QB competitions. He had to battle against Coleman Key. Obviously, Colin Hill was Bobo's golden boy, and he really, had he not gotten hurt, likely would have never given those reins back after starting that UNC game and really playing well against Minnesota. Colin Hill will forever be one of the greatest what-ifs for me. But Stevens was balling out over the second half of that 2016 season, especially played really well throughout the 2017 regular season. But that second half of 2016, he played the position about as well as anybody I've seen this century outside of, Garrett Grayson, at least from a precision, from an efficiency standpoint, being like a prototypical quarterback in a pro style, offense. It was not, BVP running around for 900 yards in 2002 and that type of stuff. He was the man, and we're going to talk about him a little bit later on in the show. But those are some of the ones that kind of stick out to me. If you have any that I'm missing from, the last decade losses that really stick out to you for CSU football, men's basketball, throw them out in the Toyota chat. We can respond to them. If you missed it, Kevin Lytle posted some news on Twitter this morning. CSU is getting a new court at Moby Arena, which I think a lot of people will be happy to hear. I don't think the modernized version was very popular amongst the diehards. It just lacked so much character. It joked about it the other day, but it felt like these modern McDonald's buildings versus, the old 80s and 90s versions, where it's like, I get what you were doing, but it's just boring and lacks any type of character now. But there will be new turf coming to Canvas Stadium as well. John Weber had talked, and Jim Mora both had talked about the need to find some solutions to reducing the injury problems that seem to be prevalent for this program, particularly over the last 10 years. Honestly, I wish they had real grass. I understand from a cost perspective why they don't do it. We're seeing a lot of schools move away from grass. Even, CU got rid of their fresh grass in Folsom, which was crazy to me because that was like one of the most, or that was, one of the best selling points of playing in that building. But I'm interested to see kind of what that looks like. What does the design look like for Moby? What does the field end up looking like? I did want to add, and this is not me being petty or like trying to talk behind Kevin's back, because I tweeted or I texted him about his tweet response. Somebody in response to his tweet this morning asking him, about the future of CSU's new uniforms, given that he posted about the new field and court coming, and whether or not, CSU was going to have Adidas or not. And Kevin said that any report of a new distributor would be premature at this juncture, which is true. And I tried to kind of articulate that on the show yesterday. It's not official. It's not set in stone. I feel very confident in that information and wouldn't come on the podcast and risk my reputation if I wasn't, confident enough that it was close to, being finalized and in the works there. That said, I just want to confirm, in case anybody has any doubts about what I said on yesterday's show, I do fully anticipate Adidas being the new apparel provider for CSU athletics. When that will fully come to fruition, still TBD, but that's in the works, and I stand by the info yesterday, even if it's more of a sourced rumor at this point than a bona fide report. It's kind of a weird balance. Kevin has to go about things a little bit differently than I do working for a traditional print newspaper, which is just part of the process. And I've evolved over the years in terms of how I operate, despite, not working in print media or being like a by the books journalist, the type of journalism that I studied in school. I do try and keep those principles with the way that I operate, and I've always talked about that. I have the benefit of getting to be a little bit more honest with the audience about where I stand in terms of my biases and my allegiances. I get to openly be like, I'm a CSU guy, and honestly, I think it would be a waste of everybody's time for me to pretend like I'm not a CSU guy or like I didn't have an emotional investment in all of this. You try and separate that in the moment and be a professional. I can't be throwing a temper tantrum every podcast or, going in the press conference and going full Jerry Springer or something like that. I do feel like I find a pretty good balance, and I have hopefully established a reputation at this point of being fair and accurate and all of that type of stuff. But I just wanted to clear that up. I understand why Kevin, especially as a traditional newspaper journalist, you can't go on board and say that's happening. It's not finalized yet. That's how you can, potentially get yourself in trouble. That said, I just wanted to make it clear that, one, not taking a shot at my guy. Two, I stand by the info that I put out on the podcast, a lot like, a lot of the other tidbits that I've dropped on the show over the last couple of years when it comes to what's happening with coaches and recruits and transfers and all that kind of stuff. I don't claim to be the only CSU source out there or the only person who's got, good sourcing when it comes to CSU athletics. I've got all the respect in the world for, all of my counterparts on the CSU beat and some of the other, digital creators that have come up in the scene over the last year or so. It's been cool to see that there is, more CSU content than ever. But I just do my best to turn your guys' trust, and I just kind of wanted to give a couple of thoughts on that. No, it's not set in stone, but based on everything that I am hearing and information that I trust, the new apparel provider for CSU in the not too distant future is going to be Adidas, and the Under Armour era after a decade plus is going to come to an end. I know a lot of fans are going to be excited about that. I was not as passionately anti Under Armour as I think the consensus seemed to be. I think a lot of what they make is just fine. I've got multiple hoodies that I love. I've got a couple of good CSU Under Armour polos. But when it comes to basketball shoes and cleats for the players on the field, I think this is going to be a major step up. And just in terms of being associated with a brand that has a little bit more of a cooler perception, I think Adidas historically is a little bit cooler than Under Armour, just in terms of, the way it's associated with international soccer and hip hop and that kind of stuff. I'm excited to see what it could mean. And I'm interested to see how much Adidas prioritizes CSU just in terms of apparel that's available. Is it going to be really bare bones in terms of the types of alternate uniforms that you can have? Some of that's probably going to be dictated on what CSU wants to spend as well. But yeah, Adidas is coming. I'm excited to see what comes of that. We're going to keep the podcast rolling here, but I do need to shout out a couple of our awesome partners real quick. So let me do that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about CSU-BYU. Right. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. Toyota also offers more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices. 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, though, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota really is the perfect option for Colorado living. You can have the benefit of good fuel mileage, which is huge these days, especially with gas prices being what they are. But you also have the durability and versatility to go off-roading, to explore the slope, the mountains, all of the beautiful places that this wonderful state has to offer. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics. They are the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right, guys, I don't know about you, but aging, it's kind of a tough process, and it's very quickly starting to become clear to me that I ain't as good as I once was. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same. You're feeling good one day, then you're feeling old. It's crazy how it happens. Most men start losing testosterone around the age of 30. They lose about 1% after that. Here's why you should try Mars Men, because not only do you lose testosterone the older that you get, you actually don't even have the ability to access the testosterone your body is using. There's a protein called SHBG that basically handcuffs your testosterone. So even if you're making it, SHBG locks it up so your body can't access it. Mars Men is designed to help you free lock testosterone so your body can actually use it. No synthetics, no needles, just real ingredients that help optimize energy, focus, and strength. If you're looking for stronger physical performance, better recovery in the gym, just more consistent and naturally feeling energy, not like a caffeine rush from a cup of coffee. It's more of like a steadier sense of drive throughout the day. It's a great way to support healthy T levels, have better energy and stamina, and it's made with 8 natural clinically dosed ingredients. There's a 90-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk involved. And for a limited time, our listeners can get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 gifts when they go to mengotomars.com. That's mengotomars.com for 50% off plus 3 free gifts when you check out. It's also available on Amazon. After you purchase, they will ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. All right, if you are rocking live with us live on YouTube and you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, I certainly would appreciate it. Help me out with the algorithm and whatnot. If you're listening later on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, and you've never left a review and you wouldn't mind doing so, positive review goes a long way there as well. I'm going to not ramble on as much as I talked about the CSU Air Force rivalry yesterday, but I did briefly just want to touch on the CSU-BYU history and why I am excited to have this long-time regional matchup, this once great conference rivalry reignited in 2026 and 2027 with the games in Fort Collins and Provo. CSU and BYU will be playing for the first time since 2010 when the Cougars left the Mountain West. I'm going to get a BYU perspective at some point on the pod this summer. I've actually been hit up by a couple of different BYU creators to get me on their shows as well. So I think both sides kind of reminiscing a little bit about a relationship that used to be. BYU does lead the all-time series 39-27-3. There have been stretches of domination on both sides, though. Like BYU, especially over the last 25, 30 years, very much dominant in this matchup. CSU actually won the first 6 matchups. It was between 1922 and 28, but they won 14 of the first 20 overall. The dynamic really didn't flip until around the mid-70s, and then that's kind of when BYU started to really build something up, and obviously they were a powerhouse in the 80s. BYU won 10 matchups in a row between 75 and 85. The 86 and 94 CSU teams were the only Rams teams to win before Sonny won 3 of 4 between 2000 and 2003. BYU won 7 straight before leaving the Mountain West after 2010, though. So the Rams, looking for their first win over the Cougars in over 2 decades. Funny enough, 3 of CSU's last 5 wins over BYU all came in Provo. That was the case in '86 with Steve Bartolo and that great team, Kelly Stauffer at quarterback. It was the case in '94 when I believe that would have been Anthony Hill and that great team went into Provo and were able to win. And it was obviously the case in '03 when BVP and the Rams went into Provo and handed the Cougars their worst home loss in over 50 years. The Rams went back-to-back in that stretch. It was the first time since '64-'65 that they were able to do that. It would be awesome to see them be able to pull it off, these next couple of years. Probably not going to happen, but a guy can dream, right? Again, that was BYU's worst home loss since they lost 48-0 to Wyoming all the way back in 1950. BVP threw 3 touchdowns that night. Marcus Houston rushed for 3. I believe both the 2002 and 2003 games were part of those Thursday night matchups on ESPN2 that the Mountain West used to be famous for. I really do kind of miss those games. I would be all about the Pac-12 playing on some Thursday nights and getting to have Saturdays to watch the rest of the college football slate or run your errands or, experience the outdoors or do whatever else you want to do in this great state. The last one in FOCO over BYU in 2002, CSU wins 37-10. Cecil the Diesel went for 164 and a couple of tutties. It was a long time ago. It's making me feel pretty old here to realize how long ago some of these matchups were from my childhood. BYU was kind of the big bad bully back in the day. They were the team that everybody in the Mountain West 1.0, if you will, the original iteration of the conference, loved to root against. To be fair, their fans were pretty obnoxious. They talked a ton of shit. They were dominant, so they were not wrong in doing so. They weren't ignorant and pounding their chest and thinking that they were the big bad boys on the block for much of their time in the league, as well as, much of their time throughout the WAC. They were. I feel like there's a little bit of a similar vibe with Utah State basketball fans right now, and where it's a big advantage in terms of home court and home field advantage when you have a student base who, instead of being interested in going out and drinking and partying and that kind of stuff, the kind of stereotypical collegiate experience, they are locked in on every single game. They are out there, with the gloves on and doing their thing. It's admirable. And I talked about it in the Mountain West tournament. It's pretty cool to see the way those Utah State fans can take over a building on the road. I think BYU kind of did that for years. It's part of why they rub people the wrong way. They'd come into your building, they would talk trash as BYU throttled your team, and it was a little bit tough to take there for a while. But that's what made some of those wins, especially in the second half of the peak under Lubick there, that kind of 2000 to 2003 range, to see BVP and those boys kind of whoop up on BYU a little bit. And man, it would be big if Mora and Co could find a way to get a win over BYU this season. My guy Archie saying it's football season for sure. Had to break out the BVP jersey and feel a little bit better about myself. Northside saying, I can't wait to see that game. I can't either, man. It's genuinely one of the games I'm most excited for on the schedule. I don't necessarily have the highest of expectations because I am pretty high on what BYU can be this year. I think they're going to be a contender in the Big 12. I think Bachmeier's a stud at QB. That said, get a little bit of positive momentum going. If you can get a border war win, maybe go out and really beat the hell out of Southern Utah. It would be nice to get a Savannah State 2015 type thumping where you hang 60 on someone and just convincingly roll in a way that you just haven't been able to against an FCS team. Who knows, at that point you get a little bit of confidence. If you're 2-0, I imagine that becomes a sellout game. There's certainly going to be plenty of BYU fans that make the trip to Fort Collins. It's going to be a lot of fun. And honestly, these are the types of games that I want to see on the schedule. I really leaned into when they first started scheduling those those big premier brands, the trips to Alabama, which admittedly I had a lot of fun on. That 2017 trip to Tuscaloosa is one of my favorite experiences as a CSU guy. I do think that it started to get old pretty quickly, though, to start every season losing 50-7 to Michigan or Texas or whoever it may be. It just feels so anticlimactic after coming into the year with some excitement, and then it's like, man, this is how we're going, and you're going to be the underdog still in matchups against BYU and CU, and I'd be happy to see the Utah Utes on the schedule at some point again down the line. It does feel like you have a better chance of winning that game. It feels like it draws a little bit more local interest just due to the regional ties and all the history that you have together. I think the more games that you can have against the BYUs, the CU, Utah, Wyoming, obviously, now that they're not in the same conference, the better. And I do understand there's a tad bit of irony there, given my stance that the CSU Air Force rivalry is not really a matchup we're going to miss all that much. But I said that yesterday even. I do understand the people who are bummed about it simply through the lens of less regional rivalries, less, matchups with tradition and a bunch of history is not good for college football. And in principle, I agree with you there. But I would be just fine with the situation if the trade-off was, yeah, we're not playing Air Force every year anymore, or potentially even at all. We'll see what happens there. But we do, have Wyoming on the schedule every single season. We're playing CU most years. We've got games against BYU and Utah and those types of teams. Like the game against the U of A, as long as it stays on the books, we'll see. I think that'll be fun in a couple of years as well. Like those are really the types of games that feel smart to schedule to me versus, say losing by 50 in the big house, especially in the CFP era, right? Like there's more of an incentive now to try and schedule your way to 10, 11 wins and maybe not play those big brands. And maybe you're not going to get the respect that you would if you were able to, take down a top 10 or a top 15 team or something like that. But there's kind of an element of gamesmanship here, and you do have to be strategic with the way that you schedule, and you got to protect yourself a little bit. And you want to strike that balance of, we want to play a schedule that is exciting and intriguing for the fans. You don't want the product to be scale or for the matchups to feel like they're undesirable, because I do think that's part of why people got so excited for some of those games they scheduled against Bama and some of those big trips, is there was a stretch in the mid 2000s, like late Sunny, early Fairchild, where it felt like the schedule was just pretty meh. Like you were playing a lot of Cal Polys and Weber States and those type of teams. Like it just was not a lot of fun. And I understand that, and that's a balance. And that's why I like, that you've got Wyoming and BYU. Obviously you want to schedule a win, so you put Southern Utah on the books, but I do think there's something to be said about leaning into these regional P4 games where it feels like they've got a little bit of added value. It does feel like there's a chance to earn some respect if you punch up and win that game. It doesn't feel, though, like you're going in there with a hope and a prayer. You're not going into the number one team in the country just hoping to stay healthy enough to live to fight another day. You're going in there with legitimate aspirations of, we can pull this off. Like, this is a winnable game. Yeah, we know we're 11-point underdogs or whatever it is, but you're not 42-point dogs with no chance at all of even competing. And I know some people will hear me say stuff like that and be like, man, that's loser talk. You got to be willing to go play anyone, any place, anywhere. Sure, but living in reality here, like, you do want to kind of protect yourself a little bit while still trying to draw crowds and, please the masses with an intriguing schedule. And I think the balance this year is pretty solid. I'm pretty excited about what this slate can be. Hopefully it goes a little bit better than 24, though, because I was pretty excited about that home slate too. And obviously that showdown was just a debacle in every sense, but even some of the other games that year just didn't quite go as expected. I'm going to react to your predictions here in just a second. Let me shout out a couple of more partners and we'll do the second half of the show. Bring your friends, fans, and frenemies together one Casamigos Marg at a time, no matter who you're supporting. Say cheers with a Casamigos Margarita. Pair your World Cup watch party food with a delicious new ready-to-enjoy Casamigos Margarita. Made with the best simple ingredients, Blanco tequila, lime juice, and natural flavors. They're sure to rival any of your favorite hangout spots. Uncork, pour over ice, and garnish with lime. Just 110 calories per serving, plus real juice. They've got 2 flavors, classic lime and spicy. We'll be hosting at the DNVR bar watch parties for the U.S. men's national team throughout the World Cup tournament right here. Check that out at thednvr.com/events. We'll be hosting those watch parties on June 12th, 19th, and the 25th. The first is against Paraguay on June 12th. Whether you're at your favorite spot or stocking up for home, make it Casamigos. I also want to shout out our friends at New Built Restoration and Construction, licensed general contractors who can help with any project, big or small. They're available 24/7 and truly care about being there for their customers. There's over 600 reviews that prove this to be true. They'll work with your insurance to make sure a stressful process like this is as smooth as possible. Some of the repair services offered include fire damage, water damage, mold removal, repair services, commercial projects, and more. They're true DNVR fans, and we're excited to support their business as well. We try and align with people in the community who do the right things, who stand by their community. We certainly try to stand by ours. When that home emergency hits, New Built Restoration and Construction will be there at nubilt.com, or you can call them at 720-902-7472. Let them know that DNVR sent you. Right. I see somebody in the chat, Kevin, saying, glad we canceled Indiana. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of those games that were originally on the books, Texas Tech, Indiana. That trip to Oklahoma in 27 is not going to happen, but that will probably allow you to keep the continuous streak against Wyoming going, which I think is important to both sides. I do hope that those games against the U of A stay on the books, because I think those are fun matchups and kind of are similar to what I was saying here about the matchup with BYU. That said, it was supposed to be on yesterday's show. I dropped the ball by rambling too much. I'm going to pull up your bold predictions here. Feel free to comment them in the Toyota chat as well if you have some more. Okay. What do we have? Starting with Mang the Rams, something, Tommy Maher. You want to know what, guys? Stand by your mans. I'm not selling my Tommy Maher stock. I still believe that he can be an impactful guy for you in the slot. There's a reason all these coaches love him. Like, the kid is always open in practice. It's kind of confusing. I'm excited to see, what he can potentially be with more stability under center, more stability on the sidelines as well. And in terms of, who's calling those offensive plays for you. 3 play callers in a year is never going to be a recipe for success. CSU Rams Tough tweets at me the 6-7 gif. I assume that's saying 6 to 7 wins for the Rams is your prediction. That's where I put the floor. Is 6, or at least is what it needs to be. I think that should be the expectation going into the season. I had them at a floor of 7 wins. I think that should be possible with 7 home games on the schedule. But I talked about the importance of needing to find some success away from campus, right? You've been so poor on the road over the last 10 years. And when you factor in some of the challenges you have at home this year with BYU, Boise, and San Diego State all coming to town, I do think it's kind of paramount that you find a way to steal some of these trips to Texas State, to Utah State, to UTSA. If you go over in those games, you're really going to have to pull some pretty significant upsets, I think, in order to be in the postseason or conference championship conversation if things really go well. But let's walk before we talk about running. Shoot, let's crawl even before we talk about walking. Let's get to a bowl and, I don't know, maybe win one, maybe not get dog walked by a MAC team in Tucson, maybe not lose to Idaho in their last game in the FBS. That would be something, wouldn't it? Our guy CSU Ram T says Haas Haney will be the offensive player of the year in the Pac-12. Tyler Shannon really coming out bold. I like it. I like the optimism. I don't think it would be impossible, especially if he were really to pop as a dual threat guy. I don't really feel like outside of Brad Jackson and maybe Lucky Sutton, San Diego State, both the Boise backs are going to be really good, and Dylan Riley and Sire Gaines, Madsen, just based on reputation at this point, it's probably got to be in the conversation. But it's not like you're going into the year with a Devontae Adams or something like that, even, an Ashton Genty or one of those guys where it's like, it's his award to lose. It's him and then everybody else. I don't feel like that's the case. And I think that's both exciting for the Pac-12 in year one and potentially a pitfall, is that you're going to have solid parity and the games are going to be competitive and they're going to be entertaining and they're going to be a lot of fun, but you potentially have a lot of cannibalization, and that can be problematic if, you look and there's a team like Memphis that goes 11-1 in the American, or say New Mexico, really follows up what they did last year with a bang. I'm fading UNLV for the record. Look at their first 6 weeks. It's kind of a wonky travel schedule. Like, I don't think them being 2-4, 3-3 out of the gate is impossible. That said, they skunked their way to some of the most fluky nonsense wins over the first month of last year too, and then ended up pretty good. So maybe I just have to accept that UNLV is a different program than they once were. But I do think that it's going to be really big for the Pac-12 to get into the playoff, and I just wonder if that ends up being an issue. Like, you don't have a team dominant enough to kind of establish the reputation of being CFP worthy. We'll see. If you don't get into the CFP and the Mountain West does, that is a disaster scenario. Even the American or Sun Belt getting in over you would be bad, but just the lawsuit and the one-for-one comparisons and just obviously the relationship and the history, the Pac-12 and the Mountain West will forever be compared against each other. It's just how it's going to work moving forward. Ryan Gilbert says the November 28th flex game will determine if CSU goes to the Pac-12 Conference Championship game. Going bold. Ryan feels like the Rams are going to be legit under Jim Mora in year one. Hey, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not willing to go so bold as to say I think this team is a championship team. I just don't think we know enough about what they're going to be on the defensive side. Do they have enough depth in the trenches is something that is lingering in the back of my mind. I do think they'll have a starting offensive line that's competent enough. I don't know if it's going to be that 2013, 2014 group, or like even 2017, where you've got multiple all-conference players, but I do think they'll be fine. I like that they went out and got some size through the portal. They spend real money on their tackles, and they need those guys to hold up if this team is going to even come close to, meeting expectations. But it's just tough to say given how dinged up they were in the spring. So many of the players you expect to be in the mix for CSU defensively in the front seven were out over the second half of the spring, or we hadn't even seen them because they were coming off of regular season injuries. If you can be even average defensively and the offense, takes a major leap, which it basically has to, like, it can't get worse than what it was last year. I like CSU's chances with 7 home games with a road slate that's not crazy daunting to be in the mix there. I think they're going to have to earn it more than they did in 24. You don't have the benefit of getting to avoid the top teams in the conference. You're going to have to split at worst, I think, against San Diego State and Boise State to realistically have a chance. You certainly got to win that Texas State game. But I don't think it's impossible, because I just don't think anybody in the league is going to run the table or anything like that. I just don't think there's going to be enough of a gap between anyone, but you never know, right? Like, as much as I love to say Boise isn't what they used to be, and I feel that way wholeheartedly, like, the gap between them and the rest of the field isn't what it was. This isn't 2011 with Kellen Moore coming to town. That said, they've still won 3 straight conference championships. They still are the face of the league, and until somebody is able to knock them off that throne, as much as UNLV fans love to yap like little, lap dogs about how they're the big bad boys now and they're equals with Boise and all that. It's bullshit. It's nonsense. The peak of your existence as a program right now. Yes, you won 10 games. That's great. You certainly have been in the spotlight more so than you ever have been. The peak is still losing to Boise like 5 times over the last 4 years, including in every head-to-head matchup that you played. So I don't understand the logic there. That's one that I can get a little bit fired up about and could derail the show for sure. Is just the UNLV fans getting a little too big for their britches and needing to kind of stay in their lane a little bit. Yes, it's great. But lots of programs have had flashes in the pan. Just look at, the Jim McElwain era. You think it's going to be really something, we're going to be this moving forward. And then very quickly you're sitting there right back in the basement again and just thinking like, man, that really escalated on me quickly. My guy Aaron Harris says Haney throws for 3,000 and runs for 1,000. CSU still ends up 6-6. That would be very CSU. If he does throw for 3,000 yards and rush for 1,000 yards, I do think Haney's probably the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. That would break Bradlee Van Pelt's single season rushing record set in 2002. For CSU quarterback to ever rush for 1,000 yards, that would be a cool achievement. I would be down for that. But again, I don't think 6-6 would feel shocking given how much roster turnover you've had, given just how much we don't know at this point about, who's going to be the stars for you defensively and that kind of stuff. We'll just have to see. I will say the bowl game though has to be the floor. You can't. I don't think you can even talk yourself into like a 23 where you go 5-7 as being we're close. It's got to be now. I think the patience has worn out at this point collectively with the fan base. And I mean, Mora and Weber kind of set the expectation themselves when they came out on record and said, we want to play for a Pac-12 championship this season. Every year counts. I don't know why anyone would be accepting of, punting on a season or looking at it through the lens of like, we're new here, like all the games count. So go out and try and win them. Mike Rose says, we have more wins than our GPA. The spring semester was 3.024. That was a program record, I believe. God, I hope so. If you're sub 3 wins, it's going to be a long year. Colton Kirby says, bowl bound. They sure as hell better be. Let's get a bowl win. I'm to the point now where it's like a bowl game should be the expectation. You should be able to squeak out 500. You're not exactly in the SEC West here. Can you win a bowl game against a MAC team or whoever the hell you end up playing this year? We'll see. I will say with the Point Seta Bowl, this was Point. I don't remember who DM'd this to me after the show a couple weeks back, so my apologies. Thank you for the note, even though I'm not giving you credit here. With the Point Seta Bowl matching up the OG Pac-12, or at least the most recent version of the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 2.0, if you will, this new creation of it, there is a world where we could get a CSU-CU Point Seta Bowl. You don't have any showdowns on the book the next 3 seasons, not until 29 when they come back to Fort Collins. There is a world in which you could get to CSU-CU showdown in the Point Seta Bowl, which could you imagine the drama of that? It would certainly move the needle. There would be eyeballs on that. I don't know if it's going to be quite as juicy now that we don't have the Norvell Dion beef for ESPN to really run with, but I do think just the rivalry itself would be great TV. One second. Excuse me. Sorry. All right. My guy Thaddeus says multiple NFL prospects emerge and we actually win games. I think there are certainly NFL prospects on this team. Umar Diamande at linebacker, Kenyon Aggers at the jack position, Juice Farine at tight end, potentially Pierce Sperlin at tight end if he can, stay on the field. Didn't participate a ton this spring, but I think the potential is definitely there. I like both these quarterbacks. I like Mel Brown a lot. They've got some NFL guys. I think even at tackle, maybe one of these guys could be in the mix. Actually winning games would be a sight for sore eyes, though. Luke Contreras says the Bronze Boot returns to Fort Collins. Talk about a way to kick off the Jim Mora era would be beating Wyoming week 1. You have all the excitement, with your Pac-12 debut looming. Like, CSU has got to do itself a favor here and kick the door down in a major way in September. I joked yesterday that it's going to feel more Earth, Wind, and Fire, September versus Wake Me Up When September Ends from Green Day. I really hope that proves to be the case. The inability to have a winning record, coming out of the month of September is a big reason why the Rams have come up short so consistently over the last 10 years. CSU Rams Daily says 8-4 is as bold as I will be. I could also see us having the defensive player of the year. 8-4 is incredibly bold, for the record. Like, if you're coming out on the record based on the history saying CSU is going to go like 11-1, if you hit it, all the power to you, and you never know. I mean, a couple of years ago, somebody picked UNLV in the media poll to win the Mountain West, and they went to the Mountain West championship game, but like, we were all mocking them very openly. Like, we couldn't believe someone did that, and it happened. So you never know. But 8 wins, I mean, you're coming off of a 2-win season. Like, that would be a momentous improvement. Brady says bowl game and we win it. I certainly hope so. TD, Rams lead the Pac-12 in turnover margin. That would be something. That would take CSU forcing so many more turnovers than we have seen them do over the last 10 years. But hey, I'd love to see it. Especially with the aggressive brand of defense that you're going to play under Tyson Summers. You're going to pressure the quarterback. You're going to play a lot of man coverage. You have to generate chaos. You've got to create far more turnovers than you have in recent years if you're going to have success. Tim says 12-2 conference champ and bowl win or playoff appearance. Tim just going for it. And I respect it. I respect the boldness. I am gun shy after the last 15 years, but I appreciate your excitement. And again, I'd love to see it. Kevin's got us at over 6 rushing touchdowns from a quarterback. A solo stat or collectively? I'm curious. I think collectively it certainly happens. 6+ rushing touchdowns from an individual would be far more than anything we have seen in recent years. Frank's got us winning the Pac-12. Why not us, right? Why not CSU in a year where it feels very open? You guys are talking me into feeling a little bit of hope. I'm probably still a little more grounded in reality just based on watching what I believe to be the best hockey team in the world completely flame out, but you never know. Andrew from what is this account here? Sorry, Andrew's college football tour. He says Colorado State makes a bowl this season. Alex says they lose to Boise by only 20 this year. That's a Boise fan zinger. Haha. The games have been a lot more competitive over the last decade, for the record, outside of the Adazio debacle. Paul says, I predicted that with their portal moves and money they spent on football last year, they were a dark horse candidate for the Mountain West championship game. So I have no idea. I mean, that was what Norvell talked himself into too, right? Like, that was the message that was sold. We've got a lot of veterans. We've gone out and reinforced some of these positions through the portal. We've got a 3rd-year starting quarterback. And obviously none of that mattered. Jeff says, if Mora can revive UConn football to a semblance of respectability, no reason he can't do the same thing here starting in 2026. Fire me up, Jeff. Fire me the F up. Dane says the BYU game is an OT thriller. I'd love it, man. If even if you lose, if it's like the 08 game, sign me up. That's one of my favorite regular season, just random matchups of all time. Joe says they will throw the ball down the field. I hope so. Shaboozle, 8 wins minimum, going real bold. I like it. Again, I can't quite get there in terms of pounding my chest just based on the history. But I do think that, I don't think 8 wins is like a crazy thing to anticipate in a year where you have 7 home games and a fairly approachable road slate. But the history just says they find a way to mess it up. The history just says, in a road slate where 4-1 feels like it could be very on the table, they go 2-3. Like, that's just what CSU has done over the years. And until they prove otherwise, it's tough to come on here and say that's going to happen. Trojan Catholic has them going to the playoff. Talking about playoffs? Just want to win a game. Forest Avenue says 8-4, a confidence, but I think still modest projection, at least compared to some. But I'm not hating. Like, for those that are coming out bold and saying we're going to the Pac-12 title or we're going to the playoff, I'd love to see it. And frankly, the path is on the table. It's part of why you make this league in the first place, right? Is access to the CFP. Most years, whoever wins the Pac-12 should be in the CFP. But I just will believe it when I see it at this point. Even the best CSU teams have found a way to come up short. Like, I think back to that 2014 team and blowing the Air Force game, and you lost to Boise week 2 as well, but blowing the Air Force game when you had an opportunity to win 11 games and play your way into the conference championship. And I know McElwain had one foot out the door and he lost to a really good Air Force team. There was no shame in it. It just, the history says the other shoe is going to fall at some point. In 2017, you look like you're playing the best ball of the Bobo era. And then in 3 weeks, you lose to Air Force, Wyoming, and Josh Allen in the snow. And then, the debacle, the 28-3 debacle, where you just absolutely implode with a chance to upset Boise in the state pride unis for the first time. They find a way to do less with more. And until CSU can prove otherwise, I'll believe it when I see it. I'm hopeful, but I've been hurt too many times. I've had the football pulled away too many times by Lucy to confidently run up and try and kick it again. I can't do it. I can't. I wish that I could, and I'm sure by the time August comes around, I'll talk myself more into that, like, no, they are going to get to the 8-win range. I still don't know if I'm going to get to the double-digit wins and playoff, at least without, seeing them go out. And you beat the hell out of Wyoming week 1. You hang against BYU. You start 4-1. All right, we'll start talking. But at that point, you've got to go out and earn the respect, because it's not just given. And the history, again, just says that CSU will find a way to mess it up. I just wish that wasn't true, but until we see it change, I've been hurt too many times. You ain't gonna fool me again, Rams. You can't. I did want to just briefly wrap up here. Let me see. I guess we have any more comments in the Toyota chat that I should get to before I move on. Morning that bowl game. Shitty Shiny is still running. Kevin says another bold prediction. CSU has 5 sellouts. Wyoming, by BYU, Oregon State, Boise, and another 4 feels pretty obtainable. 5 would be a bold prediction. Fair. Yeah, I mean, Wyoming should absolutely be a sellout. Oregon State should be a sellout, given that it's homecoming in the Pac-12 opener. BYU should be a sellout. So if you can have a hot start in September, I don't see why Boise, why San Diego State, or the regular season finale all couldn't potentially be in play. Joey says JM versus the UNLV fan base. Let's go. It's just one of those, like, who do you think you are? Like, the Mountain West diehards, and I've talked about how, like, I'm rooting for that league, but there are some people in that UNLV fan base. There's some trolls you see it from Wyoming and New Mexico fans a little bit as well, but especially from those UNLV fans that have me questioning my sanity. Like, did I fall asleep for a couple of years? Was I in a coma and I missed UNLV winning all these conference championships? Like, 27 years of Mountain West history, and the only Mountain West championship that's still going to be in the Mountain West next year is San Jose State. It's San Jose State. It's not UNLV. It's San Jose State. And I just can't with the, like, we're better than all the other G5 brands. We're leaving you behind. We're going to the Big 12. Get fucking real. Get real. All right. I released my top 20 players of the Mountain West era for CSU football. There's 3 parts. You can go out and check that out at thednvr.com. If you're not a diehard, I encourage you to do so. You get a free shirt with subscription. You get deals at the bar, all kinds of great stuff. I, unsurprisingly, really stressed it far more than I should over an off-season piece. It's one of those, like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to care about it, and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to try and be fair. I'm going to try and recognize when my own personal biases and the guys that I grew up with hard eyes are potentially, over, kind of trumping the logic, if you will, that can happen. There are guys growing up who I just am always going to have a soft spot in my heart for because they were my favorite players in my childhood. There's that emotional connection there. And I think one of the things that I really struggled with putting this together is, should one of the more modern players be considered for that top spot over Bradlee Van Pelt? BVP is my guy. I think everybody knows it. I'm rocking a BVP Broncos jersey. Got his photo up here on the wall here. It's an autographed photo of him and Cecil and Kevin McDougal, one of my favorite random, pieces of Ram memorabilia that I have. To me, BVP is synonymous with the best CSU has been in the 21st century. I think the 94 or 97 teams probably have a stronger case as the best teams in program history, despite, pulling off that upset over the number 7/number 6 Buffs, depending on which poll you're looking at. BVP more wins as CSU starting quarterback than any other player in history. He and Moses Moreno, the only QBs to top the 20 win mark. He was the 2-time Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. My guy Cam Chorizo gives a lot of love to Matt Newton, who, in his defense, from a winning percentage, BVP had more total wins. Matt Newton had a better winning percentage. He led CSU to its highest end-of-year ranking, as well as back-to-back Mountain West titles. He was perfect against CU and Wyoming. Newton probably is the most underrated player in CSU history. I really do think he has a strong case as that. I don't think he's quite on the tier, at least when it comes to his legacy, with the Bradlee Van Pelts of the world, with the Rashard Higgins and Trey McBrides and Garrett Graysons. And when I was doing that ranking, and I don't want to spoil it, I did spend a lot of time on it, so please go check it out, read the whole list, but I will give you the top 5 here. The top 5 for me are David Anderson, legendary CSU receiver. I know some people are going to say you had him over Torrey, you had him over Gallup and Scoff. I didn't even have Preston Williams on the list. I think he, just with what he did in big games, balled out in every bowl, scored against the Buffs, had at least 140 yards against CU, Air Force, Wyoming, and BYU at various points in his career. Like when the lights were bright, that dude balled out. Not the most explosive athlete, like Michael Gallup, Higgins, all those guys are going to stand out more in the combine side. But when it came to just precision route running, sure hands, the ability to step up when your team needs you, like DA was that dude. Maybe my bias is coming in to play a little bit there, but I think his longevity too should come into play. And it's why I had him over guys like Capri. Like Capri was really hard to rank for me. I think I put him at 7. That one single season is probably the most individually dominant effort from a Ram ever. It's only 1 year though. And that's what it's like. How do you compare one fun year versus guys who are part of championship winning teams who were conference players of the year? BVP is a 2-time Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. He, Grayson, and Matt Newton, the players to have that esteemed honor during their time. I do think, though, that Trey McBride has a really strong case. Like, I think if you're going to compare somebody, I do think I put Grayson just a tad below Trey and Rashard, despite the fact that Garrett's responsible for two of the three most prolific passing seasons in school history in terms of passing yards, passing touchdowns. 2014 is 1 for both. 2013 is number 3. And then Stevens in 2017 is in between the two. I think he played the quarterback position better than anyone this century in terms of running a pro-style offense. Like his efficiency, the way that offense clicked was huge. Also, I think a part of that has to do with Hollywood Higgins being out there and just being open 24/7. Rashard or Devontae Adams are the best wide receivers in Mountain West history. So, like, if you're the best at your respective position in league history, you probably have a case as the GOAT for the Mountain West era. The tough part for me is, well, Hollywood was a part of a fun stretch there under McElwain, and why Trey is, from my time on the beat, the guy that I've gotten to cover that was the most dominant, because Capri and Rashard were both when I was working for the football team. Like, you won a Mackey. It's him and Greg Myers. I think that's got to put him in the conversation. You won a national award, the only 2 players in school history to do so. Plus the fact that he was loyal during the NIL portal era and is now the best Ram in the NFL. Is that legacy comparable to BVP? I think it's close. I really almost put Trey on that top spot just because I think if you're going pound for pound, just talent, like you'd give that to Trey. But BVP in his demeanor and the legacy and the fact that he was associated with winning, which at the end of the day is what matters most, I think he's still got to have that top spot. I think when you look back on CSU in the Mountain West era, he is the first name that's going to come to mind. And that's why I think he should have that top spot. I don't think in terms of NFL potential, he's even like top 3 in those quarterbacks. You know, like Moreno, Grayson, all those guys had a better chance of being a pro. But just with the way he carried himself, the head spike, the FU mentality, the willingness to dog your rival on the mic and not hold anything back. Like, I just think that face is like what we think of when we look back on the Mountain West era and all the good times. And for me, I just don't think he can. I don't think he can be topped. Like as much as I think he can be, topped if the conversation is just talent or NFL potential or that type of stuff. When we're talking about just legacy, when we're talking about being a fan favorite, the winning, and also statistically speaking, like he's not as efficient as a passer, but that dude was a dog of a rushing quarterback. 8 100-yard games, rushed for 800 plus yards in 02. Like he was a beast. I think BVP's still got to be that top guy, but again, maybe that's just my own biases coming into play. Joey, those comments were coming from X, but I am going to get an email set up this summer. I know I've been saying that for like 6 months, but I apologize. That said, that's all I've got for you guys. We'll be back on our normal schedule next week, Tuesday, Thursday. Shout out to the homie Kale for being flexible and hopping on the production, making this happen. Shout out to all of you for sticking with us, even in the dead of the offseason. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills at brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.